Hello everyone and welcome to Saturn Returns with me, Caggie Dunlop. This is a podcast that aims to bring clarity during transitional times where there can be confusion and doubt. Today is a very special episode as I'm joined by one of my oldest friends. She really needs no introduction for those of you who have followed me from the beginning of my career, and that is Millie Mackintosh. Me and Millie first met when we were 15 or 16 and we became fast friends. We did our gap year together. She's the reason I did Made in Chelsea, and we've been friends ever since, and you guys have wanted her on the podcast, and so I'm very excited to share this conversation. In this conversation with Millie, we discuss her experience at school. And the reason I wanted to talk to her about this is because having known Millie for as long as I have and been as close to her as I am, I know about that experience, and I think it's an interesting angle because I don't think many of you would. Millie has become very famous. She's often in the press, and I sometimes feel that when people have that public persona, we think we know them, but we don't actually know their experiences or why they are the way they are. And so it was really insightful for Millie to open up as vulnerably as she did in this conversation and talk about what made her the person she is today. And some of those experiences were difficult for her, but I think it's really interesting and very humanizing. We also discuss motherhood and the role that Millie is in now with her 2 kids and how that's been really grounding for her. It's something that it keeps popping up for me personally, as I guess I'm at that age where it's more around me. A lot of people are kind of shifting into that role. So it was really interesting hearing Millie's perspective on her turbulent 20s, I guess going through her Saturn Return and then finding this sort of peace in motherhood and a real sense of purpose in it. We also touch on sobriety, which Millie openly talks about as something that she and I both struggled with our relationship with alcohol for similar and different reasons. And she's very truthful in this conversation about her experience with it, her struggles with anxiety, and her decision to go sober, basically. So if that's something you guys are struggling with, something you want to address and haven't quite got the courage to yet, I hope you find this episode supportive. Well, Millie Mac, welcome.
Hi, my love. I can't stop giggling because we're back on camera and it's just giving me some flashbacks, and it's like a kind of deja vu feeling.
I know it's like a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of excitement.
Yeah.
What's around the corner?
Like, oh God, who's going to come through the door? Where's the third camera?
Obviously, you don't really need an introduction because everyone knows who you are. But this is the first time you've actually been on Saturn Returns, which is super exciting. We've wanted to have you. There's been a lot of demand to have you on the show. So I guess we're going to obviously discuss how we know each other. Obviously, people will think that we know each other more through Made in Chelsea, but actually our friendship far predates that.
Yeah.
Because we met when we were...
I think we were 16.
16 years old. In
London. It was someone's birthday...
Anthony's birthday.
It was in a club, I think.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Was it Henry J. Beans?
Yes.
It was Henry J. Beans.
Yeah. Okay, I think I was wearing some really indecent ripped
were wearing
jeans.
some very indecent jeans that had slashes through the buttocks.
They were so ripped that there was more skin on show than there was jeans.
Denim.
My mum actually threw
Did
them
you
in the
do
bin.
those? Did you make them?
No, that kind of look of the really ripped jeans, but then as I wore them more and more, the rips got more indecent.
Yeah, it was a good look. It was a strong.
It was
look.
always this really low cut jeans and then the little crop top.
Yeah, that was the fashion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But before that, if we were to go back, because I kind of wanted to explore today a little bit with you about school life.
Yeah.
What that was like for you, because to a lot of people listening, they will know you through firstly Made in Chelsea and then everything you've gone on to do today. And, I guess for your life since then, it has been very much in the public eye, living life as a famous person. But what was your school experience like?
My school experience, and I have been thinking about this recently actually, because we need to put a Sienna down for schools and it kind of brings it back a bit. You have to start thinking about where they're going to go to school and what her experience is going to be like, because mine was pretty awful. I went to 5 different schools.
You went to 5?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was 5.
And I was quite badly bullied at probably like 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one I went to was like near to where we lived in the countryside. It was in Wiltshire. And I left there when I was 9 and went to my first boarding school. And it's something also I've been like doing some work on in therapy recently, because like when I go back through my life and I've been trying to kind of get more to like the root causes of my anxiety, I think a lot of it stems from being sent to this school when I was 9.
Sent to boarding school?
Yeah, sent to boarding school.
Because you didn't feel ready to leave home?
I mean, who is ready to leave home at 9? Now I've got a little girl.
Yeah.
It's kind of uncomfortable, like having these thoughts and being like, why was I sent to school when I was 9? Like, was I, you know, it's made me really question, was I like this really awful child? And I really think my parents just thought it was the best option for me at that time, because the school I was at, I wasn't getting on that well. They had like a change in like headmaster. My parents didn't really like the like direction the school was going in. And I went to this boarding school where you could ride ponies every day, and it's now like closed down. It was quite like St. Trinian's, and it was in Dorset, so it's quite far from where my parents lived, like a couple of hours. It was quite brutal because you didn't have phones, and you literally would just write letters home on a Sunday.
That was it?
Yeah. And you go home, like it wasn't weekly boarding. It was like you go home
for a holiday.
And like half term and holidays. So maybe like every couple of weeks.
Did you remember being homesick there?
Yeah, like devastated. Like I would literally like cry and just like cry and stare at a picture of my parents and like cry myself to sleep, write letters home that were like so tear stained you couldn't like read what it said, but basically begging to leave. I tried to run away.
How did that go?
I got to like the end of the drive and was hungry, I think. But like the intent was there. Like I was like, this is
Didn't
awful.
want to be there.
Then I think that probably went on for like 6 months or so of just being like really hating it. And then I did slowly start to make a few friends and like get more used to it. And then I think the rest of the time I was there, I do have some good memories. It wasn't like all bad. And there wasn't any severe bullying at that school. I'd say it was more, there was when the older years have this really, like the older years will just pick on the younger years, and you have to really like have respect for the older years. And
it's
there's
that
kind
social hierarchy.
Social hierarchy. And if you're kind of not in with, if you like do something wrong to the wrong person, they'll be like really have it in for you like the whole time that you're there. So it was all definitely all about like respect. So that was my experience there. And then when I was 12, I went to a school called North Fallen Lodge, which went all the way up to 18, and I actually really enjoyed it and was kind of coming out my shell. Like, I remember I had my first kiss. It was an all girls school, but like I was kind of at that stage between being a girl, like kind of just going into my teens,
kind of blossoming,
being like more interested in boys, like feeling a bit more confident. And then it shut down after a year. Then I went to Westonbirt, which was I think where I was when I met you. All girls. Actually, maybe we were like 14 when we met.
Well, you were there maybe 15.
Yeah, like 15. GCSE time.
Yeah.
And
it was before you went to Millfield.
Yeah, I was there for 3 years, so that we would have met when I was at Westonbirt. That was all girls boarding, and really that the girls were super mean because the school I was at before had closed down. I went there like in the middle of the term. So, all the friendship groups had already been made.
That's tough.
It was, and I was like the new girl that had joined a few weeks into the term, and that was the girls were so mean. I had like, just like, that was like really bad bullying.
Girls at that age can be quite savage.
And so I thought, I did 3 years there and I really didn't like it. And I thought, if I go to a mixed school, that's going to be the answer. So I went to Millfield for sixth form, and that was probably the worst of them all.
Why?
Because the boys were like actually just as bad as the girls, or if not worse.
In bullying?
Yeah.
In what kind of bullying?
Like, in the way that boys will like label you something and like pick on you and just be like quite cruel.
Yeah.
And by that age, you've kind of got like alcohol added into the mix, like all of that going on as well.
I also think with the schools that, I don't know about Millfield, but the schools that were boys only schools and then introduce girls,
Yeah.
they've got sort of got quite a chauvinistic culture.
Yeah, and because it's such a sports school, it's like there's this kind of jock mentality with where all the guys kind of the jocks kind of are like the kings of the school. They kind of like rule, and they would just sit there in like the cafeteria and like mark all the new girls down.
Would they
like,
hold those cards?
It was like it was bad.
So that Millfield for you was the worst, but generally like
by
school
that point
wasn't.
I was just so like over school. I didn't want to be there. I'm surprised I actually completed sixth form, but I didn't do A levels. I actually did a BTEC diploma in art and design, which had like loads of different like modules. So I did like fashion design. I did everything from drawing to sculpture to photography. A lot of what I did there does actually feed into what I do in my job now.
Mm-hmm.
You would learn, how to edit photos in like Photoshop and how to, do conventional photography, but then also the digital side. So it was really creative, and that kept my interest a little bit. But like overall, I was like so over school, couldn't wait to leave. Didn't want to do any further education, so I didn't go to uni, which I've been having discussions with Hugo about because he thinks it's like so important, and I don't.
Yeah.
And now we have to think about like, it's a while away, but
it's a big conversation because I think I think our parents' generation, it was just like you have to go to university, otherwise you don't stand.
My parents
a chance.
didn't go to uni.
They didn't. Yeah.
So they didn't really put pressure on me to go to uni either.
I guess it really depends what you want to do, but for you, the things that you learn actually have applied quite well. I guess just by coincidence in many ways, because it wasn't like a straightforward trajectory to where you are now.
I weirdly feel that because I didn't have an easy time at school in my teen years, and that kind of teasing and bullying, a lot of the time the way I dealt with it was by like kind of laughing it off and like kind of trying to build this like tough exterior, pretending I didn't care. I think some of that has been quite useful since being in the public eye. Also, I've had this like strong sense of like I will make it, like as a
because
fuck
of
you.
that.
Yeah,
interesting. Because as someone that's known you since you were 15, I've always like the girl that I met was well put together, beautiful. Everyone like wanted to know who you were. All the boys wanted to be with you. So I never knew like Millie before that.
Yeah, because we were friends while I was at school because we weren't at the same school.
Yeah. But also, like you say, you kind of went through that stage of blossoming, probably when you went to the girls only school, when you went through halfway through the term, and you kind of were changing and becoming more of a woman, which perhaps was threatening to some of the other girls there.
Now I can see that.
But at the time, you didn't know.
I was like this gangly teenager that I was just really unsure of how I looked. I wanted approval. I wanted to be told I looked pretty, but other girls were so mean.
What kind of things would they do?
Like try and like break my nose with a lacrosse stick that was, or was it a polo stick? Like they would set like traps. So if I like walked into the room, there would be something that would like swing and like hit me in the face, or
so really bad bullying.
Just, like mean, really mean girl stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I got scouted at the clothes show, which I remember being like, it like started quite a lot of bullying, and I was like so excited by it. I was like, I think about 14. Wow, like it would be my dream to be a model. Like it was like this big deal. And I remember getting this phone call, and it was one of the girls like pretending to be like a model agent, like calling me. And I was like ecstatic. Like I'd waited like months and hadn't heard anything, and I thought I was like getting this call to say like, can you come to London? And then like I just heard someone like laughing. I just remember like my heart like dropped.
That is shocking.
Like, that was just like standard stuff.
That was just a standard day in the week.
Yeah.
Oh my God. How did you react to it at the time?
I don't really remember. I think I have shut out quite a lot of the memories, but what I do remember that I would pretend to find it really funny. Just I was like, as like a kind of protection method.
Mm-hmm. Like you weren't affected by it.
Yeah, just pretend like it didn't, but it would like it hadn't hurt me. Like if you don't show them that you've been hurt.
Did you feel like you were trying to find it funny in a way that you still wanted to be part of their gang?
Yeah.
Like you wanted to be accepted by them?
Yeah, totally.
Even though they were rejecting you?
Yeah. Just as like a okay, how can I make this seem funny so it's all okay and it's not really such a big deal? Like I don't really remember like I didn't talk to my parents about it. I don't remember talking to a teacher about it. I was so desperate to like be accepted and be part of the kind of social norm.
How do you think that's impacted you? Because you mentioned a second ago about, you know, getting to the root of your anxiety. How do you think that's impacted you in the woman you are today? In like, because obviously then, you know, if we fast forward a couple of years and then you're put into the public eye and getting all this sort of press attention, everything like that, that's in like a whole different world of exposure, but also comes with a lot of criticism and a lot of opinion. And your life very much from that point has been documented in the public domain. How have you like managed that? Because personally for me, like I find that too anxiety inducing and like kind of tapped out of a lot of it. So how have you, like, what's that experience been like for you?
I think good and bad, but I'd say I feel like I've been like lucky, and I feel really lucky to have had the opportunities and the, you know, the career path that has happened since we went on the show, because we didn't know like what it was going to be. Like, we went on the show thinking this could just be, I don't know, we literally didn't even have a name, so we were like, what are we doing?
I remember, I think it was sort of, we viewed it as it would either be successful or go completely under the radar. We didn't anticipate the third route, which was everyone would like hate us, or like it was just kind of this very polarized thing. You know, people loved it or they hated it. It was kind of like Marmite of TV.
But I look back on it, I'm like so grateful that we did that. But yeah, it was quite intense being thrust into the kind of public spotlight at 21. When I think back over that whole of my 20s, to be honest, it's just, there's a lot of anxiety that was there. And it's something that I've talked about it quite a lot, something that I've been on a journey to trying to, I don't know if you can really ever fix it, but trying to learn to live with it and trying to reduce it to a point where it's not something that really bothers me in my day-to-day life. Yes, it can be, it's still there sometimes and I have to deal with it when it comes up. But I would say through the kind of therapy that I've done, a lot of it stems down to kind of childhood stuff and my school years, and those formative years are so important. And if what you go through and experience in those years will affect you for the rest of your life, which definitely since having kids, you become like really hyper aware of that. And yeah, it did make me really like anxious. I've had like bouts of depression. I was depressed when I was at school. I was diagnosed with depression when I was like 16. Then they tried to prescribe me with medication and I refused to take it. I probably should have. It probably would have helped, but I was just so in such a negative headspace. I didn't even want the help at that point. But even when I was thinking back like recently to like when did I first register that I was having a panic attack or that I had anxiety, because it wasn't talked about as much. No. But when we went traveling, so
I was just suddenly remembered.
I was
when
18 and I was actually anxious a lot of the time.
Yeah, and just to add for our listeners, me and Millie did our gap year together, which when our parents dropped us off at Gatwick, I couldn't believe they were letting us go to travel the world on our own, because we were nightmares and so irresponsible and didn't have a clue. I don't know how we made it back in one piece, to be honest. But you did, I remember when we were traveling, you did, and now the language would have been, you know, anxiety, panic attack, but we didn't really have the vocabulary. I remember being
at the full moon party with you in Thailand, and I would just, which obviously is very anxiety inducing. It's a lot of people like taking a lot of drugs. It's super loud music. It's an overload of like sensory overload, but just, it was quite terrifying. And I just remember I didn't want to be alone, but I didn't want to be at the party, but I was so uncomfortable. And I just remember having a lot of like stomach issues as well, which now I know were so linked to the anxiety. And I had this really uncomfortable IBS symptoms where I would get these kind of stomach cramps and feel a bit like sick. And
you had stomach issues from the get-go when we were traveling, which obviously in, you know, Bali and wherever we were was not ideal.
No.
And I think my approach was sort of like, suck it up, let's go out.
Just drink some more alcohol. That'll solve it. Don't think I had it, like,
Stop being such a downer, Millie. You're like,
was a
no,
lot of
actually,
that.
I'm really ill.
No, actually, I really can't drink. But it was like just yeah. It was there wasn't really an option. It was like we were out most nights for like 4 months.
Yeah. So how, when you mentioned the anxiety and like, so thinking about traveling, like, why do you think particularly that? Do you think it was the being out of comfort zone in foreign places?
Yeah, I think a lot of, you're far from home, like much further from home than I'd ever been. I'm trying to think. I don't know if I'd even, I had left Europe before that, but it was like a lot further than I'd been. Far from home, there's a lot of uncertainty. You don't have that kind of, you don't have a routine. You don't know kind of where you're even going to be staying like the following week. Like we had a rough plan because we went to like Bali, then Australia, then we went to Thailand.
But not really. I mean, it was all pretty free flowing. And I always think as well, when we travel, especially when it is unstructured, it can bring a lot of stuff to the surface, because even routine and, having things in a structured order keeps things at bay. So if we've been like suppressing certain emotions and stuff, often like when you go abroad and all of that goes out the window, it kind of is brought up to your conscious mind.
But also at that age, I didn't have any concept of self-care, like obviously,
or tools for how to manage it.
Going to get my nails done or a massage or something. Sure, that was self-care, but I didn't have any routine. I hadn't discovered at that stage yet how useful exercise can be to help aid with mental health. I didn't have any thoughts about my mental health. I just knew that I felt awful, but I didn't have any idea or any tools to make myself feel better.
And then when Made in Chelsea came about, did you view that as, you could, because I always feel like you had quite a clear trajectory of like the path that you wanted to go down. Did it feel like an immediate yes for you? Was it like,
because when I went on to Made in Chelsea, I guess I had this dream since I was like this teenage girl that had been like scouted, that I wanted to be a model. And I had auditioned for Britain's Next Top Model. Do you remember? And then when I got through a couple of the rounds, when I didn't get through to the final round, and the Made in Chelsea producers at the same time had been like kind of trying to get a meeting with me, that's when I was like, okay, well, that opportunity to get onto TV and maybe like further my career as a model or in some way. I was also trained as a makeup artist, and I was working as part-time as a makeup artist. So I thought this is in some way is going to help me like progress to the next level and speed things up a little bit. I just thought I'm going to use this platform somehow. And
you did. I think of everyone in the show, you went into it being like, I know what I'm going to get out of it, rather than just, I don't know, just kind of mucking around. Like it felt like you were quite clear about your goals.
I knew it was an opportunity, and when people sometimes ask me and say, do you feel like exploited by the show? I feel like I kind of did think of it like, okay, I'm going to get what I can out of this.
Yeah, and they'll get what they can out of you. So it was like an exchange.
I kind of saw it that way.
How do you feel that the fame aspect exacerbated the anxiety, or how?
Totally. I mean, how can it not? And I think the way everyone has like camera phones now, it's like that feeling of like
being watched,
whatever you do anywhere. One of the hardest things that I found is you can't, like, you're living your life, your private life in public, and people, anyone, anywhere can, if you're not in a private space, can take a picture, take a video of what you're doing.
Yeah. What are there any particular moments that come to mind that you found particularly hard when that's happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, there has been a lot of anxiety inducing moments, because it has been like super uncomfortable, and I have made mistakes, like we all do when we're young. Like I look back over my 20s, and there was lots of ups and downs. I feel like some of it, though, I had to go through in order to get to the place that I'm in now.
When you, obviously, like the whole show is about people going through their Saturn return, and in your late 20s, like you went through massive changes
Yes.
and everything kind of was turned upside down. What was that
Yeah.
particular, like looking back now, how do you reflect on that time? Like, what are your thoughts and feelings around it? Like, what place were you in then versus where you're at now?
My late 20s, I had got divorced, which probably wasn't expecting to have done by the time I was like 26.
Because how long were you guys married for?
I was married from, I think I was like 24 to 26.
Was it that
or
young?
27, 20. Yeah, I think I was about 23 when I got engaged.
Wow.
So young. Didn't know like who I was yet. Was definitely still in that place, like trying to, you know, figure out who I was and what I was doing.
Whilst it being documented.
That was like, you know, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then, so I think when I was about 26, 27, I was with Hugo. We got engaged. We got married. I think I was 29.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then at 30, I got pregnant.
And how is that experience?
So in those couple of years, I went from kind of quite turbulent, getting divorced, to then being with Hugo, you know, being happy, and being like, I want a family, and getting married and having a baby.
Because what was the reconnection like with Hugo? Because I remember speaking to you about it at the time, but because that was a whirlwind period, and also really hard to go through a breakup very publicly.
It was really hard having kind of press attention around a really painful time when you just want privacy, and then the feeling of, there was a lot of anxiety actually really around, I was just an anxious mess, to be honest. At that point I was like rattling about, like lost a lot of weight, was just like everything was very like uncertain and scary as it is when you go through a breakup, let alone like a public one. And then me and Hugo has like started hanging out again as friends, and that feelings did come back up, and we started seeing each other again. But when we were like meeting up and stuff, we had to try and like hide, and because we didn't want like the press to pick up on it,
which is quite stressful.
It was really stressful.
And also you want to be able to, you know, the initial periods of sort of courtship in a relationship are crucial, and if you have the press kind of prying in, it can disrupt the organic flow of something a little bit. So I can understand that you want to be protective over that period of time. Did you manage to keep it quite private?
We definitely did try to. At the same time, like it was an anxiety-inducing time,
mm-hmm.
and I think around that first year, I feel like I was going quite off the rails. Like I was happy with him, but just like generally, I could be like quite up and down. Like it took me a while to kind of like recover and like get to the more stable place I felt like I was in, like when I got pregnant with Sienna.
Mm-hmm. And that was quite grounding.
So grounding. I actually just remember being like, thank you for like giving me this right now, like just to like the universe, because it was like I just needed it and was like, this is what I want. But at that point it was very grounding. It was like, right, I know I'd been traveling so much in those couple of years as well, I think, because I knew I did want to have children like quite soon. Like when I got back with Hugo, I was like, this is my person, and I knew that I was going to want to start that journey. So I just did loads of traveling, thinking I'm not going to be able to travel as much, and I'm really glad I did. And then I just remember feeling so lucky to be pregnant with Sienna, and just I was like, I know I'm going to be in the same place a lot more, and it just everything that was going to come with it. It's just been a massive whirlwind since then, to be honest, because Aurelia then came quite soon afterwards. The last and we had a pandemic. So that was like the last 3 years.
No.
Which is like also feels like it's gone by in a flash. Like Sienna's 3 in like 2 months.
What has motherhood, and the role of motherhood, like meant to you? Is it something that you've always wanted, or was it something that happened when you met Hugo or reconnected with Hugo that it suddenly awakened that part of you?
It definitely, for me, motherhood is something I've always wanted. I was that little girl that was like obsessed with dolls and babies, and my first jobs were like nannying, babysitting jobs when I was quite young. You know, when you live in the country and that's like the only way I could like make money was like on like evenings and weekends, babysitting. And I've always loved kids, so I always pictured having kids. And my mum,
maternal.
I feel like I'm quite a maternal person. I love looking after people, and just I get so much like happiness from the girls, especially the ages they're at now. They're really kind of affectionate. I can actually have chats with Sienna. She told me I was her best friend. And they give me so many cuddles. I just love like the closeness.
She is a mini you.
She also like wipes snot on me.
When I came over the other day,
she does it for fun
because I hadn't seen her in such a long time, and I could see that she is a little bit of a diva, and you were like, I wonder where she gets that from. Whereas Aurelia is just so chill.
No, she's quite feisty as well at times.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Oh no.
So we've got Sienna's a Taurus.
Same. Oh, yeah,
it's got the same birthday. That's a pretty big deal as well that you guys had the same birthday.
Yeah, it is quite a big deal.
And Aurelia is Scorpio.
Ooh.
Mid-November. That's a Scorpio, right?
I think so.
Anyway, they're hungry or tired. There's a lot of screaming, but when they're in a good mood, it's like so lovely to hang out with them.
How have you found managing before having kids, right?
Yeah.
Being very much in the public eye, like going to loads of parties, going to loads of events, having to present yourself in a certain way a lot of the time, which I can imagine would be quite exhausting. And also like, I guess, having a personal brand, how did you find that transition then going into motherhood from a sense of juggling all those roles, but also kind of adapting into that new aspect of yourself as a brand?
I remember having this quite funny moment when when something like flashes up on your phone and it reminds you of like this time last year.
Yeah.
And it was like the year before I'd been at Cannes Film Festival doing a job for like Magnum ice cream, like so glammed up. And then like a year on, and I was doing an ad for like a cleaning mop. And shooting the content in my kitchen, like in lockdown.
You're like,
and I was like pregnant, and I was like, this is just a pretty big change, but it just really made me laugh, like how quickly like things can change as well. I would say it has. My whole life is completely adapted, and I still get glammed up and go to events, but maybe not as often. And to be honest, I'm pretty grateful when I get to stay in and if in my comfies with my hair in a bun and like not a care in the world. It's more like it feels like a bit more of an effort when I've got to be camera ready.
How do you find those experiences now, like going to those big events? And
you know what, I actually feel so much calmer
than you did before.
Yeah, I remember I used to get loads of anxiety around like big events, like red carpet things, have all these nerves, and I actually feel more confident now in my 30s, like in myself, in my appearance, in I think I've found more confidence in myself since having my kids.
Why do you think that is?
I just care less what other people think. Like I just kind of like, this is me, but also like my body's amazing. I grew 2 humans, and I'm a bit more like fearless. Definitely have like less energy and time for haters. I'm just kind of like, this is me.
Do you feel like you do have haters?
I mean, yeah, not like you can't please everyone all the time, and there are like those Karens out there and mum police, or just that troll that's going to want to say something horrible.
How do you manage that when that stuff, if you see it? Because obviously with social media it's hard.
I went through a phase of savagely blocking people.
Good tactic.
Like, block. But then when I realized I was doing to these like people as giving them the validation that their comment had like bothered me. Yeah. So now I just actually leave it. And unless it's really horrific and sometimes you have to report something.
But do you feel like you can have quite a thick skin around that stuff? Because I think you've always had, from being your friend for such a long time, like quite a thick skin and being able to handle
I think it does come
stuff.
from the kind of bullying that I experienced for sure.
So
it's like training for what the real world is going to be like.
Yeah.
Because those bullies, they leave school and they're still bullies like, a lot of the time.
Yeah. So would you say that was a positive thing that came out of it?
I think if I look back on it and kind of take something positive from it, it molded me into the person I am today. Hey, having panic attacks and struggling with anxiety and depression and having these mental health issues has not been ideal, but I feel in a really good place now that I've like done some work and like got to a place where I can see things more clearly, and I'm not living in that place where I'm having panic attacks often and now I figured out like how to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can like look back on it all and be like, it was something that I had to go through just to get to the place that I'm in now, and like have it now. I feel like I've got a better understanding of myself and like why I am the way I am.
It feels like you're at this place where you're able to confront some of this stuff and face it head on, perhaps because you feel more grounded and more settled in who you are. And I also am a big believer that, our body will bring these things up, or our mind will release these things when
we need to deal with it.
Yeah, and when we're ready and capable of dealing with it. So even though it can be tough, it's only doing that so that we can actually work through that stuff. What has been some of the useful things that you've discovered and some of the tools that you found that are really helpful?
I think it's really all about lifestyle. And also you posted the other day, I thought it was super interesting, about like showing up for yourself
mm-hmm.
and about discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true. It's like learning the discipline to get your ass up out of bed, no matter how early, to go and do that mindfulness, to go and do that workout that is going to benefit how you feel like for the rest of the day. It's so important.
Yeah.
And it's something I've really had to challenge myself to do, especially after having kids, when you don't have, it's not as easy to just wake up at whatever time.
Less time.
You've got
well.
less time. It definitely is harder, and I'm not keeping up, actually, to be honest, at the moment with my mindfulness or my movement as much, and I can feel it. Like it's childcare fell through today, so the first thing that goes is like anything I was going to do for me, which is fine. I'm a mum, that's part of it, but you have to carve out that time. Mm-hmm. And people often say, well, I don't have any time, and it's like, well, sometimes that might mean getting up at like 5 a.m. or doing it in the evening,
or not looking on Instagram and stuff. Because like if you've got time to do those things, which people seem to find the time to do, myself included, like you can find the time. And like you say, it feels so trivial, especially when you are in the midst of having a bad mental health day. You think,
but that's when you need to do it like the most.
Yeah.
Even if you get there and halfway through you start crying and because you feel so shit and you have to leave, it's still like worth it that you went.
You've showed up for yourself.
Yeah. So for me, it's like therapy, meditation. Even if that's a meditation you do while you're walking, it doesn't have to be like I love to meditate first thing in the morning. But if you don't have time to do it that way, you can do it like when you're commuting somewhere. You can do it in the back, not when you're driving, but you can do it in the car. You can do it on the train. You can just sit and listen, plug into something. You can do it while you're exercising. Mm-hmm. Finding that time to have a moment of mindfulness, exercising. And I've noticed a lot, I've been talking about this a lot, the how much alcohol affects my anxiety. So I've actually been sober for just over 6 months, which has been like life-changing.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that because I remember,
I've talked to you about it before because I've kind of admired your sober curious journey kind of from afar and been like, oh, that's cool that Cags is doing that. Like,
yeah.
And I've like picked your brains about it.
Yeah, it's that connection between that and anxiety and my mental health I couldn't ignore it anymore.
I had ignored it for ages. I knew that obviously when I was hungover, I felt anxious, but it's not just even the day after. It's like for days, like maybe up to a week.
How have the last 6 months been?
Really good. Like I feel it, like my anxiety is almost like non-existent.
Do you think you're going to carry on?
Yeah. It's not like people are like, oh, that's great. I know you're doing that like no drinking thing at the moment. Like, I'm like, no, but I'm not going to be like back on it in a week. Like this is like a lifestyle change that I think is like for life.
Yeah.
I actually love it, and I'm getting more and more into it. I am kind of that annoying person that likes to go on about it because I just feel so good and I want other people to experience it. And something that's really brought me a lot of joy recently is having other people reach out to me and ask for my advice and help because they're also finding that alcohol is not their friend, and they are sober curious, and helping those people and giving them advice and saying, oh, I listened to this podcast, or I read this book and this really helped. This is a really nice alcohol alternative drink if you're looking for one. And then like catching up with them a few weeks later and hearing like that they're feeling so much better. Like it feels really good to help other people.
100%.
Have you found that?
Yeah, and because you need a support system.
Definitely.
Because it's such a socially encouraged and normalized thing to drink.
I'll be honest, the beginning when I was like, I'm going to stop drinking was after a particularly bad panic attack. And
would you be able to talk a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, it was the end of summer. I was staying on I was with Hugo. We were staying on a friend's boat in Turkey. We weren't with the girls. It's always quite hard being away from them as well, especially somewhere where you feel like quite remote and you couldn't get to them quickly. But we had like a nice evening the night before, like not a super late night. Like I'd had a few glasses of wine, nothing. Wasn't like a wild party, but like I had wine at dinner, went to bed and woke up super early and thought I was unable to breathe. Like I felt like didn't register that I was having a panic attack. I felt like my throat was really constricted, and like and I haven't ever had an anxiety attack like show up in my body like that before. A lot of the time for me it's very much in my stomach, like I feel very nauseous. This time it was like I literally felt like my throat was closing and that I like couldn't breathe, and I like literally was like hyperventilating, couldn't get enough air, and I started to black out, and I literally in that moment was like, I'm dying. And I thought I was never going to see my kids again. It was honestly like the scariest moment of my life. And like I had woken Hugo up and he was trying to help me, and he just sat with me trying to get me to do like deeper breaths and to breathe, and like slowly I came out of it, but it like completely shook me. And he was like, okay, let's get off the boat and like go and just like go. We went on a hike, like the two of us, and we just had this like really big discussion. And he was like, where do you think that panic attack came from? And I was like, I don't think I would have had that panic attack if I hadn't been drinking that the night before. But it was like my body was trying to tell me something. You know, you said like these things like wisdom, show up.
Yeah.
And I said the words out loud. I was like, I think I should just never drink again. And like when I had said it, like it really like I was like, it was like this big statement to say it. I was like, this feels like kind of scary. Like you know, I was also on a boat with some heavy drinkers for the next few days. So I was like, what am I going to do?
But at that point, it had become undeniable.
I think I was like, this is the elephant in the room. Like alcohol is not my friend. I suffer a lot more than anyone else I know with hangovers. Like I get, you know, you've always known me. Yeah. Like they definitely got worse with age and since having kids, but my anxiety is so bad that, you know, I'll have had to cancel so many things. Just spent days feeling like a shell of a human.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Like,
it's just not worth it.
It's so not worth it. And those first few weeks, like when I was around people drinking, like I did feel quite uncomfortable. Not like, oh, I'm desperate for a drink, but more just
you feel left out.
I felt left out, and I was used to alcohol like softening how I felt in social situations. Yeah. But I'd say even like the first 2-3 months, it felt quite rough, like social occasions, and I did limit things, and I only really went to things where I really felt like I wanted to, or
and like safe enough.
Yeah. And I also had like lots of therapy. You know, I spoke to my therapist about it, and would have weekly therapy sessions where we would talk a lot about it, and that would really help as well. Mm-hmm. I think you do definitely need like a support system. But I just started to read. I like ordered a whole load of books and started listening to different podcasts, and I just started to feel better and better each week.
What were some of the resources that you found useful?
I found just like when I started educating myself more about what alcohol actually does to your brain and body, like have you listened to the Human podcast?
Yeah, I find him like so quite overwhelming because it's so much information.
Is it just me? Is he kind of hot?
I don't know what he looks like, but his voice is kind of hot.
His voice is really hot. Sorry, off topic. But that podcast, I was like, wow, that was really eye-opening. I'd say that's really a good one for anyone who's like sober curious to listen to. It's quite long, but like listen to it in 2 parts. That was really interesting. I think it would be hard to listen to that and not take some of it on board. And really, it really helped me to kind of make that link between alcohol and mental health. Like, right, this is actually it. This is what it does to your brain.
And affirming what your body's trying to communicate to you, because you have to re-educate yourself on all this information, because the normal thing in our society is to just drink.
It's so normalized, and not just drinking, but like heavy drinking.
Yeah, binge drinking.
Binge drinking in our culture, which to be honest, I was fully part of for so long. But it was just masking like my kind of uncomfortableness and how self-conscious and anxious I felt, and my kind of social anxiety.
But it charges you interest in the morning kind of thing.
Oh my gosh.
Like
so
tenfold.
The payoff is like I was getting screwed. I was like, this is not worth it. So I think having that realization that like, hey, this is not for me. But I think something that's really difficult in our culture as well is that alcohol's a drug that we're like actively encouraged to use, and if we don't use it, then we must have a problem. So there's this whole stigma around it. Like people are like, well, what's wrong with you? You don't drink. But it's like you wouldn't say that with any other drug.
You wouldn't be like, why aren't you having that line of cocaine after you're pushing?
Yeah. So when you look at it like that, you're like, wow, it's like a multi-billion-pound like industry.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of agenda behind making it that way. How have you, because I always struggled at the beginning for me.
Are you, I haven't actually asked you recently, are you still sober curious? You kind of, you drink occasionally?
I mean, for me, it's an interesting one because I like to keep the door ajar. And by that, it means that if I find myself in a situation
don't put the pressure
where,
on yourself.
Yeah, but like 99% of the time, I don't drink. When I go to anyone's party or stuff like that, I won't drink. My boyfriend drinks and I don't. That's just part of my day-to-day life. But I want to give myself the freedom that if I felt like a glass of something in the right environment at the right time, and it was most importantly that it's coming from the right place, that it's not
you're
coming
actually
from
like, why am I choosing to have this drink? Is it coming from an emotional place, or is
it coming from I want to alleviate this anxiety and escape myself, or is it coming from I want to be present and enjoy this moment and have something that's ritualistic and that's ceremonial? And so that's the distinction I like to be able to make, which is probably a bit more unusual. And I think for people that are trying to find their way on it, I always encourage people to recognize that it's a whole spectrum, and that it's just about experimenting with what works for you. That being said, I still know that no matter how much work I do, the way alcohol impacts me is still undeniable. And I might be able to get away with like having one drink and it not being so bad. But there's also a possibility, and I know if I roll the dice on that I can have one drink and I will have nightmares about it, which is something that I've had that since I went sober curious for like 5 years ago or something, that I immediately will have a dream about drinking and drinking too much and like getting things wrong.
Really, so it kind of triggers something.
Yeah, and it's almost
I've had dreams actually
about drinking
since I stopped, like kind of like I guess like an anxiety dream
that like you drink and
everything goes Peter Hong.
Yeah. So I get that all the time. So even if sometimes I have it when I haven't drunk, but it's if I have like a sip of someone's drink, it's almost like my body's registering the alcohol
all
and being like, no, let's just give her a reminder.
Well, 100% it would be. It's like, no, thank you, I don't want any poison today. Like,
which is in a way quite a clever coping strategy, because it's
amazing when you start tapping into the signs that your body is giving you.
Yeah.
And you start to be more in tune with yourself.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa.
And I love working with my dreams, so I always think that I pay attention to them. So it's not something that I'm gonna. Sometimes I wish that I could just enjoy it.
Sure.
And I don't know whether
wouldn't that be great? No repercussions.
But I don't know whether it's because of my relationship with it in my life or just because of the way that I process it. I'm not sure. What do you think? Like, as in, my relationship with alcohol got quite perhaps negative, and therefore there's a lot of bad associations. Because some of my friends have said, oh, I think when you're older, you'll be able to just drink and it will be fine. But I don't think
like life is long. You know, like I've said to myself, like I'm not going to be like, oh, I'll never, ever, ever have a drink again, because I think it does put a lot of pressure. But at this point, like I don't plan to.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I tried a lot of different ways to make alcohol work for me. Right?
Yeah.
If you've got like a list, you're like...
I wrote about this in the book. It's like only drinking spirits.
Yeah.
Only drinking champagne.
Sure.
3-drink rule. Weekend rule. It's like...
I have tried all of them. And you should, when you have to try that hard to make something work for you, I think you have to like be like, maybe we need to change something here.
It's like trying to justify a toxic relationship.
Yeah. And I have found that since like becoming alcohol free, I don't really like the word sober because I think it just sounds weighted. Like I'm free from alcohol is how I feel. I would say I've just got a much better connection with myself. And it's like she said something to me ages ago that really stuck with me. It's about choosing the you of tomorrow. If I put that the right way. Yeah. It's like choosing the person, like choosing how you're going to feel the next day, or like the future you.
Yeah. That's the
showing
most
up for that
helpful
person. So that's really helpful. I think if people are like, oh, but how at the moment do you say no to that drink? Now I actually don't find it hard. I like don't want it. I see people drinking like cheap champagne at like a kind of launch party, you know, and I'm just oh, like you're gonna have a headache tomorrow and I'm gonna feel great. That annoying smug person. I do find it annoying that when they don't have good alcohol-free options. So many people, so many places do now.
It's getting a lot better.
Abroad, not so much.
And also people like weddings and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I haven't had. I have had one small London wedding. But I've got 2 coming up this spring. But I'm actually excited for them because so often with weddings, especially if there's more than one night, the first night I'd normally like get a bit overexcited, have too many cocktails, and then like the actual wedding I'd be like trying not to like vomit in a bush, like not able to enjoy it, like filled with anxiety and just feeling like horrible.
Yeah.
And then like can't really remember it all.
Does it make you feel anxious about going to a place like that? Sober or not?
No, actually now I'm kind of just excited because I've started to actually enjoy going out again and enjoy conversations with people that I would just never even bother to have before. I feel like I'm much more like interested in what people have to say and like able to actually connect. So I'm actually kind of excited. Dancing sober, I think that's going to take me a bit long.
And you know what my dancing was like when I was drinking?
Pretty great.
I think it was great.
But you are a naturally good dancer. Yeah. But do you bring those dance moves out sober?
I can't. And this is my
people
one
say it
thing.
Comes back.
Really?
But, I don't know if I'm ever going to be like. To be honest, my drunk dancing was so bad.
I thought your drunk dancing was.
I always
good.
thought it was good, but actually. I had some flashbacks and it really wasn't.
That's the one area that I really want to crack is the dancing because I just feel
we should go
self-conscious.
to like a sober rave or something. We just need to go and like have a practice.
But you know, I like to do. I want like R&B.
Yeah, me too.
Should we find a sober? Should we start a sober R&B dance club?
Yeah, but only if it's just me and you. Only if it's just us.
I'd actually be quite up for that. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you as well, what is one thing about yourself that people wouldn't know or wouldn't expect?
Used to play the drums.
Did you? I would not have expected that. Well, did you play them well?
I thought it was pretty good actually. I used to have this like bright blue drum kit above my parents' garage. Yeah.
I'm just remembering when we went rowing. When we went rowing in Hyde Park and you actually like...
I'm dyspraxic. Okay, well, this is actually something that people don't know about me. I'm dyspraxic. There we go. I'm dyspraxic. I have dyspraxia. And
but like
I had
for
like,
those that don't know, can you explain what
it's a learning disability. So people have often heard of dyslexia, which affects like your spelling and the way you like put words together and your reading and writing, that kind of thing. But dyspraxia affects your hand-eye coordination, hence why I'm so find dancing so difficult. Like for me, one of my things that it really affects anything like learning a routine, like a dance routine, like no chance, like I will not be going on Strictly at any point, any time, because literally it would be impossible. If you throw a ball at me, I will not catch
I've
it.
thrown plenty of balls at you and they have just like hit off.
If I try and throw a ball, it normally goes the opposite direction to where I think it's going to go. So no ball sports for me. And yeah, I'm just basically quite uncoordinated.
And yet you played the drums.
Yeah. See, there you go. Doesn't need to stop you from doing anything.
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible.
Well, Mills, thank you so much for joining me.
My love. I didn't know. I thought you were going to like read me my like tea leaves, or I thought you were going to like.
I do quite like doing it. We could do that. You were going to like
read my chart.
No, I can't read birth charts.
Oh, because like you asked me all these questions the other day. You were like, "What time are you born?" And I was like, oh, maybe you're gonna like tell me.
Well, we could get Nora to do your chart. But what I was thinking of doing, and I've never done this before for people, but I just felt like we should do it for you, was for you to pull a card.
Yeah, I know, I'm interested in it. So do I just take...
Wait, you might need to put it in, but take that.
Okay.
And just firstly, like, hit it at the top, because you want to get rid of the energy. And on the side... Yeah, and then just shuffle it around.
You just like burn some sage.
I mean, I had quite a lot of incense going here earlier. So, and now, whenever like, just calm your mind and think of something you want clarity over.
Okay.
And then just like move through the cards, shuffle them around, and then when you feel ready, just pick whichever one is coming to you.
I drop them all on the floor. Okay.
Fun?
Yeah.
Do you want to you read it?
Okay. It says deep down.
Deep down.
Yeah.
Deep down inside, you always know exactly what you need. This is your intuitive knowledge. Often, however, the connection is not clear enough to make good use of it. Working with your intuition is all about making contact with that inner wisdom and trusting what the voice of intuition tells you. If you cannot discern that voice, the messy mind is creating too much noise. A calm mind, on the other hand, strengthens the access and repairs the connection you have with your intuitive body. Look at it like troubled waters in a glass, which only become clear again when stillness allows the mud to sink. This card invites you to become still, make contact with your inner voice. Both your body and your intuition are capable of sending you messages through feelings. These feelings tell you which way you should go. Only you know what is right for you, yet you often let your surroundings tell you where to go. You let the fear of change or rejection stop you. When an ocean is calm and clear, you are able to look deep in the water. Unmoved, deep down, you know what is right for you.
Wow.
That resonate?
It does, because often when people ask me like what piece of advice I would give, I always say like go with your gut, like go with your like intuition.
Yeah.
Go with that like gut response, because it's like your second brain trying to tell you something.
Yeah, it's always right.
And also right now, everything's been kind of crazy recently, like in a really good way, like loads of good things are happening. But you know, when you kind of get like caught up and you just like in a really busy kind of cycle of, you're kind of in a slightly like panicky place of just trying to get
survival mode kind of thing.
Survival mode, trying to stay on top of everything. And like I haven't been prioritizing like time to do the things that make me feel good, like meditate and exercise. I feel like I've been kind of like letting a few things step. You just can't, sometimes it's like impossible to physically do everything. But I feel like my body is telling me that I need to just like be still and just have that connection back with myself. So that was very on point.
And what is, I have one more question for you before we like fully wrap up, but what is next for you and what is like your ambition at the moment? Like what direction do you want to go in?
I feel like things are going all in a really good direction. I feel like kind of with everything I'm doing with my brand, and I'm working on projects which are coming out this spring, which are things that I really care about and feel really passionate about and I'm really enjoying working on. So I feel like things, got lots of kind of different projects going on where they're actually like passion projects. And it's finding that balance definitely with having young children. Some weeks I feel like I'm doing it better than others, where I'm spending enough time with them. When I'm working, I really feel like I want to be doing something that I really care about, and it's like, so that when I'm not with my kids, I'm like, okay, I definitely want to be here. This is something I want to be doing. I'm in a really good place, like with myself. So I'm kind of excited for like what that unlocks and what that brings. A friend said to me, they felt like when they stopped drinking, it was like someone took the handbrake off. And I thought that was like really powerful. Like you're just like trying to like get through and like go along with this thing, just like holding you back. You take the handbrake off, like you're like limitless. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
Oh, so nice chatting to you.
Thank you.
You're going to come on my podcast next. That's what I've got going on over my.
I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation. It was so nice to get Millie on. It was interesting because, you know, obviously we have spent so much time together as friends. We're now at these very different points in our lives, but to kind of come back together, it's a really beautiful thing, I think, with friendships, when you go off and you do your own thing, but ultimately when there's a real strong like connection and love there, it doesn't really matter that you're doing different things or you're on different paths, because there's always that mutual respect and love for each other. And so I very much feel that with Millie. It was lovely to get her on the show, really, and I hope that you guys found it an interesting conversation and it gave you an understanding of Millie from perhaps a different angle, and also from our relationship, which has always had a lot of humour and has been very playful, and so I'm very grateful for that. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, remember, you are not alone. And if you are struggling with sobriety, you can message me or Millie about it. I know that she is very open to talking with people about it online, as am I. So I hope we can help in some capacity if it's something you relate to. I will see you guys next week. And as always, remember, you are not alone. Goodbye.